Do we have a nucleus of the Kundalini force in our hearts? And if we do, what is the nature of this hidden and to many, many people still a mysterious force? In this live presentation of the Golden Rosy Cross tonight, we'd really like to go deep in the subject because honestly it is one of the main pillars of the universal teaching and of the spiritual path that we have open for us at this time and since the beginning of times. And since this is a live presentation, we'd like to invite you, since the very beginning of it, to start, making your questions and sharing your thoughts, your comments, because if we have time at the end, we would like to address all the questions possible. So let's get started. What is the nature of this hidden force in our hearts? This hidden force in our hearts has received many, many different names in the past, but they all indicate the same. The classic Rosicrucians called it the rose that should blossom and that should be put in the very center of the human cross. And that is really the true and very direct meaning of this concept of the rosy cross, the human cross with a rose in the center. In the East, it has been called the lotus flower, this flower that should emerge out of the muddy waters of our nature, indicating the human life, the human being that has a hidden and fabulous principle in him or in her. In old India, in ancient India, it has been called the Atman, the very universal principle of consciousness that lies in the heart of every person, of every human being. And in the modern school of the Golden Rosy Cross, we also give it a name. We call it the Spirit Spark, the Spirit Spark atom, this absolutely different and universal principle, the principle of a true self-revolution that can be ignited if we really devote our lives to it. And we go through this transformation in our lives. But why is it that when we refer ourselves to this force, using the name of Kundalini, and we associate it, calling it the Kundalini of the heart, why is it that most people tend not to know this? I mean, many people, of course, have heard about the Kundalini force, the concept of Kundalini, but, it's really not that common that people recognize that we have a Kundalini in our hearts. Well, the reason for that is because we can describe this Kundalini force with three main centers or three main nuclei in our being. And two of them are relatively well known, one of them for sure known for many, but the third one that is in the heart is almost unknown. So let's try to address some of those elements now in more detail. Most of the people know that the Kundalini force is associated with our spinal cord. And many people also know, people that like to study the esoteric themes and issues. Most of the people know that we have centers of force alongside our spinal cord. We call those centers of force, or those vortexes of power, we call them chakras. And we know that we have 7 chakras, or 7 main chakras, alongside our spinal cord. What we know through the universal teaching is that we have one of the centers of the Kundalini force right here as a vortex, as a center of power, very close, underneath but very close, the first chakra that is called the root chakra. And throughout history, and especially in the East, people have developed some practices, some exercises to incite, to ignite, to awaken this Kundalini force. And the objective is to actually force this power, or this Kundalini, up in the spinal cord through the different centers, or through the different chakras. People can do that through certain postures, through respiration, through some magic practices. But the main objective here is to start awakening and speeding up these wheels, these chakras, because in Sanskrit, by the way, chakra means wheel, right? So speed up the flow of energy, and by doing so, the person or the adept of these practices would end up gaining some particular or special powers, like the power to manipulate the creative force of life, the power of healing, the power of projecting his or her subtle bodies into the astral sphere or etheric sphere. So these practices are known, and many people seek for those practices to find balance, to find equilibrium, to find health. So this is the most known aspect of the Kundalini, okay? The second aspect of the Kundalini that some people know is related to the top chakra that we have around here at the top of our heads. This chakra is connected with the pineal gland, and it's called the crown chakra. Other methods, instead of using these exercises to force the Kundalini from bottom up through our spinal cord and through the chakras that we have here at the bottom of our spinal cord, they utilize different methods. They utilize the method of concentration, of occult exercises, of trying to develop the hidden senses like clairvoyance, clairaudience, telekinesis, and so on. The end result is the same, is an acceleration, in a certain sense, these wheels, these chakras. And the person starts gaining these hidden senses, these hidden powers and actually become, a magician, not a magician, but a person with a lot of occult power, a lot of personal influence. Many people seek for this. That is mainly, the occultist path, to try to find personal development, to try to find true knowledge, and to overcome the barriers of their own minds. But in essence, what happens when we put in practice these paths? Either the path of inciting or igniting the Kundalini force, starting from the root chakra, through what we have mentioned before, the sort of practices we said before, or the top Kundalini that is around the crown chakra, around the pineal gland. The end result, dear friends, is that, as we mentioned before, that we accelerate the speed of all the chakras that are involved in these practices and these exercises. And what is the sense of this acceleration? The sense of this acceleration is to increase more and more the amount of energy that we can bring into our own selves. And that's the source of these powers. An acceleration of astral and etheric fluids or powers that come from the outside into our being, and that increase the circulation of power in all our spinal cord and in the systems that we have around it. In other words, we are strengthening our current state of consciousness. And since we know that our current state of consciousness is an I consciousness, an egocentric consciousness, the side effect of these attempts, of these practices, is to increase and strengthen our egocentricity even more. So that is why a spiritual path cannot utilize these practices or these exercises as a basis for a true transformation. Because a true transformation should really end up changing our current state of consciousness and state of life into something different than the egocentricity and the egotism that we display in our lives, more evidently or less. That is also why the spiritual school of the Golden Rosy Cross does not utilize these methods that we have just described. And here we reach the third Kundalini center, the third nucleus of Kundalini that was never touched here. That is the Kundalini of the heart. But to talk about that, we should start from a different perspective, because up to this point, the center of all the discussion was our ego, our I-centered consciousness, and the attempt of having a better ego, a more balanced ego, a healthier ego, or whatever goes in that sense. So we must start from a different and fresh perspective. One of the pillars of the universal teaching and also the teaching of the Golden Rosy Cross is that the Kundalini of the heart, that is also a very important and powerful center of energy, a truly untapped center of energy, is not necessarily part of the human personality. It is the rose, but the rose does not belong to the cross. The rose must blossom, become united with the cross through a process, and actually transforming the cross through the unification of both. So another way to put it is understand that this center, this spirit spark, this Kundalini of the heart, is not only a center of power or a center of the Kundalini itself, but it's also the center of the true instance of the human being, the true source, the true origin of our lives. That is the human microcosm, the true eternal being, the true original, or if you want to call it divine being, within which we live, but that we are most of the times totally unaware of it. So the human microcosm has its center in the spirit spark atom. And the path is actually to unite this universal original reality and our current reality. The reality of the human being as we know it, of the human personality, that is also a fantastic system and a very complex system, but it is in essence a phenomenon of time. And here we are not only referring ourselves to the physical body, that is certainly a mortal body as we all know, but to the second body, that is the etheric body, that is the energy layer that surrounds and also lies within the physical body and actually gives life to it. Also, the astral body, that is just like, a cloud of energy that surrounds us, which organs are the chakras, the 7 chakras. So the chakras are actually organs of the astral body. And the mental body that is the youngest and is still in the process of being built by the human being and the human consciousness. So this is what we call the human personality. And in our current state of life, the human personality lives as an I-centered, as an egotist consciousness. And all its vehicles are a phenomenon of time. And if you try to develop the capabilities that are hidden or that lie in this personality by itself, without starting from the original point, without starting from the true center of the human microcosm, even if you start from the root chakra up, or from the crown chakra down, trying to develop magic capabilities or occult powers, you will end up increasing the separation and the duality of the human life. Because every additional power, be it occult, mystic, magic, it doesn't matter, that we develop based only on the personality is just like another layer of bricks in this very massive and large wall that separates us from this true reality that lies within ourselves, that is closer to ourselves than our hands and feet, but at the same time, it's so far away, just like a distant galaxy, if we take into consideration our current state of life and our current state of consciousness. So that's why we must start from a totally different perspective, as we said. And what must happen then? We tried to make this so clear on the other page that we carry a dot now, but it's not a problem. What we'll try to briefly describe now is how does the process proposed by the Golden Rosy Cross works. But dear friends, this is actually nothing new. I mean, the Golden Rosy Cross is not coming to anybody with a different method. This method is the same method that was put in place or put in practice by all the spiritual schools of the past. Actually, the practices and the exercises that we have today are like shadows of this one original method. But what is missing is really the true beginning, is really the true source, is really the true center that we call the spirit spark atom or the Kundalini of the heart. Well, the Kundalini of the heart, or let me use the same dot here. The Kundalini of the heart, or the spirit spark atom, is not a center of energy that is under the control of the human consciousness or the human ego. It does not respond to the will or the command of a trained ego. So it cannot be awakened. It cannot be ignited by exercises or occult practices or, magical practices, etc. Actually, it must become awakened by itself. And this is the result of countless lives of having this microcosm here tied to the wheel of life and death. So, in half of the cycle, the microcosm receives a human personality. It is born, it grows, it becomes an adult. Then we all grow old and we die. And then on the other side of the veil, that we tend to call heaven or hell or anything, but it's actually just the other half of this time existence, our subtle bodies, they also disappear gradually. And in the very end, we have the microcosm empty again. So this microcosm accumulates experiences in its magnetic sphere that we also know as karma. And through countless turns in this wheel, this microcosm starts to mature, starts to accumulate enough experience as if it was a fruit that slowly becomes ripened. So when this quantum of experience, this quantum of accumulated karma or lives, if you will, is minimally enough, this center awakens. And when the center awakens, it enters in resonance with the very center of our consciousness in our heart, the center of our identity, the center, as some call it, the center of our soul. And the center of the human soul, the center of the human consciousness, also awakes and starts to look for an answer, because life in that very moment becomes something very strange. All the personal goals or all the egocentric objectives, they tend to become something different. They lose their colors. It's shining. The person, the human consciousness, starts to look for something deeper, for something different. If this person actually starts a path based on that force that has already awakened in him or her, and not through exercises or practices, but because of a true yearning of the heart of the human consciousness, but also a yearning from the heart of the human microcosm, then that person can start a process of transformation. It is as if this Kundalini, this vortex of power, started to gradually unfold. You may look at this as a vortex of energy, but you can also look at this as a rosebud that is blossoming. And this new center of power that starts to awaken in the human heart has the ability, has the capability of transforming the second center of the human awareness that lies in our head, in our consciousness, or as the universal teaching calls it, the sanctuary of the head, because that's what it should become. And when this power has grown strong enough to start transforming in a permanent way the center of the head, then it can also flow to our reality of life. In the region where our karma, the heritage of the past, the biological heritage of all mankind lies, that is the sanctuary of life. And through the combination of this voice of the silence that resounds in our hearts and a new awareness that awakens in our consciousness, we can gradually start changing our lives based on it. Not through a forced attitude, but through self-knowledge, through the yearning of the heart, and through the self-knowledge that starts to awaken in our minds. And then a new attitude towards life, a new inner attitude starts to blossom, starts to rise. And then the circuit is closed. And after countless turns, countless interactions, countless cycles of this force that actually, dear friends, circulate through the sympathetic and parasympathetic system that is around our central spinal cord, we start to create a new system, a new serpent fire system, as we call it, because our spinal cord and with the systems that lie around it is truly, the main pillar of energy, where the energy of our consciousness becomes the state of being of ourselves in our lives. This is what we call, in the spiritual school, a new consciousness, a new awareness, and a new state of life. It is the transformation of all the forces and all the power that actually circulate in the human being, but not through forced practices or through occult exercises that have the purpose of making the ego more powerful. Actually, it is a true self-surrender of the human ego to the true ego, the true ego sum, the true divine original particle that lies within his or her own heart, but also is the center of his microcosm. When this process advances, then a final transformation can take place. A transformation where, through the inflow of the universal energy that we call the Spirit, through the 7 aspects of this energy that we call the Spirit, or the 7 rays of the Spirit, let me draw the 7 here, more or less. Then all the 7 centers of our astral body can be transformed as well. And not only the astral body, but the mental body, the astral body itself, and also the etheric gown, or the etheric body itself, or the lines of force that actually create the superior part of the etheric body. And when this process is concluded, then all the 7 centers are transformed through the unification, through the true unity of the 3 centers of the Kundalini force, based on the Kundalini of the heart, that is Atman, the rose, the lotus flower, or the spirit spark in your heart. This path is the path that allows the human being to become one with a human microcosm. We hope that this brief explanation was useful to you in your process of your own quest, of your own path. And now we would like to address any question that you might have asked during this introduction. So let's see if we have any questions. Yes, there is one question. If the spinal column transforms the energy of thought and ego into being, does what we are occupied with mentally transform our appearance? Let me see if I understood your question. We have an axiom in the universal teaching that says state of consciousness is state of life. or awareness creates reality. Actually, this circulation of power in our spinal cord takes our thoughts and our will, and here I'm, referring specifically to the 3 top chakras that we have here in our head, in these positions, right? That are linked to our, upper thoughts and intuition, our reason and our will. And they transform themselves into our state of being, in our creative interaction with life, and also ties us or connects us with the past and with karma. But, dear friends, if it is true to say that this works in this sense, that our state of consciousness creates our state of being, in our current state of life, we can also say that karma, that all the automatic reactions that we have ingrained in ourselves, and all the biological past also determines our thoughts. And that is why we can also see this as a closed, almost like a vicious cycle. That is why, we must find a turning point. We must find something that is a new beginning and that can allow us to transform the system into something else. And if we continue to try to develop and strengthen the system based on these practices and exercises and things that we have mentioned so far, this closed loop will only get stronger. That is why, even if those practices, they come from very old schools and very, very noble schools from the past, there is a missing link. Not in the teaching of these schools, but when we decide to put in practice those teachings. Because we cannot merely start by training our ego to try to make it better. We have to start from the only particle, from the only aspect of the whole human manifestation that is free from that vicious cycle of ego. And that is why the Golden Rosy Cross and all the spiritual schools of the past insist. You must know yourself first. You must realize how trained and conditioned you are before you start. The Voice of the Silence, that marvelous book, suggests that, we really have to be careful with ourselves before we put our feet on the first step of the ladder, of the spiritual path, the spiritual ladder. That warning is really trying to indicate to us that unless there is a major turnaround, that we may end up only making this wall stronger, wider, higher. And that is why, chasing a change in our external reality or in our appearance, if I may, if we don't change the innermost of our being through this inner revolution, then it's truly just, a superficial change. It's just, training. But the fundamental nature of the problem will not be transformed. So I hope that I could have addressed, to some extent, this first question. So let's move now to the second one. is there a pattern of thought that can transform our body to have greater outer beauty outside of general good health and exercise? In other words, what is the beautiful philosophy? That's an interesting question. Well, first I think we should reflect a little bit on what is beauty. The classic Rosicrucians, they said that the whole quest, the whole existence of mankind was to try to achieve 3 ideals or 3 goals. They called these 3 goals beauty, truth, and justice. And if we look around in the outer world, maybe those 3 are, among the top 3, top 5, top 10 things that we lack the most, isn't it? So, what they suggest is that to achieve those aspects or those ideals, it's really not changing our external appearance or our external reality. So beauty cannot lie on that level. Beauty must be a different state of manifestation, a different source of harmony that projects into a shape, into a form, into a body, into a face, into a pair of eyes, something that stems from within as a true source of harmony, as a true source of love, as a true source of beauty, if you will. That is why the transformation this is really becoming messy here, sorry. So the true transformation of the human heart is the source of true beauty, of this inner source of harmony, this inner source of balance that transpires in everything that we are. Truth. Truth should be the result of an objective mind. A mind that is truly silent and that can observe itself without judgment. How much time don't we spend every day judging our own thoughts and, stating things to ourselves and criticizing ourselves and suffering in anticipation? We don't live occupied. We actually live awfully preoccupied, isn't it? So this source of awareness that is cloudy, muddy in our minds, in our heads, prevents us from seeing reality. And in reality, when we don't judge it, we have the universal laws in manifestation. We have the original, if you want to call them, divine laws in manifestation. But it is our judgment, our attachment to our points of view that make us suffer and make us live in a refraction, in a shadow of truth. So in the moment that this true inner source, this original source in the heart, is able to become a fire in our hearts, then a new light of understanding can be here in our heads. And then we may glimpse for the first time the truth. The truth that is not a concept, that is not an idea, but the truth that stems from all the reality that is around us. But this reality, we are impervious to it because we cannot perceive it. So that's the second transformation. And justice, that is eventually the biggest challenge. I mean, let's summarize this by saying that this justice that the classic Rosicrucians refer to is not putting in practice my justice or your justice or our partial version of justice. But justice should be the ability to answer to the true needs of all beings around us. And in the moment that our heart is silent and that our mind is truly clear and we can see reality, then we can put ourselves at the service of reality. And this is also another name for love. True love. That is to flow with the need of all beings, all life around you. So maybe that is a beautiful philosophy, but it is beautiful not because it is an attempt to put in practice an idealized image of beauty, but actually because it lies within totally different inner fundamentals. I hope to have helped you. So, the third question: what is the connection of the spiritual school path of the Golden Rosy Cross with self-knowledge? Well, I would say it's the same path. The Pythagorean school had this motto to begin with: know yourself. And for the spiritual school, self-knowledge is one of the pillars of the path. And why? Because self-knowledge should be the result of the transformation of these two centers of the human soul, of the human consciousness. The center of identity that we call the heart. And the change of identity in the heart should truly be a transformation from the cause, the true source of suffering. That is the fact that we live separated from our true self. In the moment that there is the beginning of this unification, then the mind can start to become silent and clear. And then you can start, maybe for the first time, through an objective consciousness, to gain increasing levels of self-awareness. This self-awareness that is not the training of the egocentric mind through techniques or through self-analysis, but it is the result of this inner power that awakens in us and that, grows like a fire that becomes light in our head. That is true self-knowledge, because this new identity and this new understanding, just like the old lighthouses of the past. Imagine a lighthouse. The old lighthouses had always here a fire burning and a mirror, a silver mirror. And then when the power and the light of the fire goes up and gets reflected in the mirror, then a beam of light can be projected in our life, in the sea of our life. And this is self-knowledge. So to answer your question, actually it is the same path. Let's move to the fourth question. Does this, or I would suppose, does this process allow us to essentially expand our ethereal body to be larger and hence result in more peace of mind and health? Well, that's also a very interesting question. The universal teaching explains to us that we have a double ethereal or etheric, some call it etheric body. We have a more dense layer of the etheric body that actually and exactly mirrors the physical body. So it is as this more dense aspect of the ethereal body is an energetic image of the physical body with all its organs and all its structure. There is a second layer of the etheric body. And I suppose that most of you know those Chinese medicine maps that show all those lines of force, right? So if we detach that part from the physical body, actually it would look like this, more or less. Lines of force. That also, in some sense, mirror our physical image, but they don't mirror the shape of our organs and members and structure. Why are we saying this? Because this state of consciousness, maybe I don't need to turn the page again. So imagine our thoughts, very clouded thoughts, very egocentric thoughts, a huge level of inner noise, right? How does that translate into this structure and this structure? In this physical structure, it translates, so all that self-poisoning, that translates into accumulated tension and eventually cell degeneration. And we know, and we are going to know more and more, that practically all the diseases that we have as human beings, first of all, they start in our mind. Or state of consciousness is state of life. But the impact that this inner poisoning, this self-poisoning that we carry in ourselves all the time, that, by the way, becomes even stronger when we try to force a development based on this state of consciousness, so we just make it stronger and bigger. They accumulate as tensions in these lines of force and in the nodes that we have here. And this is the image of suffering, the image of a self-centered life, the image of a life separated from the origin. And unless, or until, I should say, we begin this process of making ourselves one again with this original source, with this spirit spark, with this spirit spark particle or atom, if you want to call it, and then we transform our consciousness in the first place. And through a transformation of our consciousness, we transform our bodies, not only our mental body, astral body, but also the ethereal body, as you said, we will continue to carry this self-imprisonment, this self-imprisoned state. So the consequence of this process is to free up all the vehicles from this state of things. It is not done, or it is not meant to increase the power of radiation of our current vehicles, because this would only increase the level of tension that we carry. The transformation of all our vehicles that actually can take place should be a consequence of a much deeper change that, first of all, should take place in the consciousness and have its source and origin in the center of the heart of our microcosm. I hope I have somehow answered your question. And now we should go to the last one, the fifth question. Should we first focus on stabilizing our chakras? Well, there are many methods that try to clean, stabilize, harmonize the chakras. Because, if you think about your astral body, here it is. Your astral body. Your organs in your astral body are your chakras. So just like you have your brains physically, right? And you have two hemispheres of your brain. You have two chakras here that correspond to the two hemispheres of your brain. Just like you have, your vocal cords and your thyroides. I hope I said that correctly. If not, be nice with me. You have, another chakra that is also here. You have your heart and one of the main chakras of your body right in it. You have your liver, you have your spleen, pancreas, and you have the solar plexus here, and so on. Well, it must become clear to us that if we don't change, in essence, who we are, it doesn't really matter if we try to balance our physical body or if we try to balance our chakras. Because that system, if we don't go through a true inner revolution or a true change in our state of consciousness, it is, quote unquote, unbalanceable. You cannot balance it. You cannot stabilize it. Because these wheels, in essence, they turn almost like eccentric wheels or wheels without a center, because they are subject to the inner storm of our state of consciousness. So all the lack of silence and equilibrium and everything that you carry in your head as the direct result of our egocentric state of life, of course they destabilize all the chakras that you have here, the three main chakras and the many other ones. And that they create tensions in the lines of force of the etheric body that actually translate in the end into a problem with your physical organs. So, should we start here or here? Well, of course we must take care of our health, right? Our life is intense, we all go through a lot of stress. But, a pupil of a spiritual school is someone that is aware, he or she, that if on one hand he or she must pursue the right treatment and the best available medicine around, that if we don't change ourselves first, that this is going to look like a pendulum. The lack of equilibrium is going to lie sometimes here, and we are going to be chasing this, just like a squirrel running around its own wheel. That is why the spiritual school, and honestly the spiritual schools of all time, say that the only possible true healing that we can go through is by making ourselves one with this true, universal, inner, divine principle. Call it the way you want. Because as we said, this is really the true center of the Kundalini, this endless energy that is untapped by the human ego, that can become active and transform the human consciousness, and not only stabilize or balance, because, this is not the objective, because this body, this vest, right? We know it is a product of time and should disappear with time. But this transformation can transform as well all the vehicles of the human being. And this is the true and only source of health. The source of health by unifying the spirit, the soul, and the body. The spirit spark, the human consciousness, and all the vehicles. Well, that was the last question. We really appreciate the opportunity of sharing these thoughts with you tonight. And we hope to be back in the near future with another subject of the teachings of the spiritual school of the Golden Rosy Cross, of another topic of the universal teaching. Good night, my friends. Till the next time.